Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this InfoReady Peer Spotlight webinar with Devon Jones from Rice University. Today, we'll be covering a couple different topics, one faculty awards and the other related to uh, managing InfoReady at an institutional level, being a main point of contact. And so, uh, I will be introducing Devin in a moment, but we have some housekeeping items to talk about the logistics of the webinar. Um, the webinar is scheduled for 60 minutes. I will be your host. I'm Carlos Moncada, Director of Client Services. Uh, there'll be about 40 minutes for presentation and about 20 minutes for Q&A. This Peer Spotlight webinar, we'll switch it up a little bit and answer really pertinent targeted questions in the middle of the presentation as well. For those of you who have attended the training webinars, they'll have a little bit more of that dynamic feel to it. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A option in Zoom. It's easiest to manage questions when you do that. The phones are muted, so Q&A definitely the best tool for asking those questions. The webinar is being recorded, and so if you would like a copy of it, we'll actually be sending a follow-up email to everyone with the webinar and the presentation slides. And then lastly, after the webinar is over, there will be a survey that will load in your browser. That just has a few general questions about your experience with the webinar, and you can ask additional questions there. And now, before we get into the presentation, just a few words on InfoReady. InfoReady is a centralized platform that can manage all aspects of your process. So the basic concepts of InfoReady are that you can post opportunities and collect applications and route them for review and approval. There are many other pieces of functionality that really streamline the process and save a lot on administrative tasks that you all experience on a regular basis, such as maybe managing documents, collating them, sharing them, notifications, follow up. InfoReady does a lot to streamline and remove much of that in your process. Now, the general concepts of InfoReady can be adopted to many different processes and use cases. On this next page, you'll see a list of many different types of use cases managed in InfoReady. So we're not going to get into all of these, but on this page, you'll see faculty awards, which we're covering today. InfoReady does have template sharing, so your colleagues can share templates with you. We also have a template library where we can share starter templates with you as well if you're interested. So let us know if you have any interest in templates for any of these processes or others. Now, with those housekeeping items out of the way, I would like to introduce Devon Jones, PhD from Rice University. Devon joined Rice in 2021 in the Office of the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, where she now serves as Faculty Lifecycle Manager. In this role, she supports the full spectrum of faculty milestones from recruitment and onboarding to recognition and retirement, helping to strengthen the faculty experience and advance institutional excellence. Before joining Rice, Devon worked in development and project coordination roles for a range of mission-driven organizations, including Tonality, which is a choral spectrum in Los Angeles, and the Inter-University Program for Latino Research. Her background blends expertise in academic operations, program management, and relationship building across higher education and nonprofit sectors. Devon holds a PhD and an MA in political science from the University of Houston, where she was the Maud Smith Paddock Fellow, and a BA in International Relations from Samford University. Devon currently lives in Nashville, Tennessee, with her husband, her two dogs, and their 22-month-old son. Welcome, Devon.
Thanks, Carlos. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you again for joining today's webinar. As Carlos mentioned, my name is Devon Jones. I serve as the Faculty Lifecycle Manager in the Office of the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs at Rice University, also known as VPAA. In my role, I do closely work with our faculty and academic leaders to manage everything from dual career recruitment, internal recognition and awards, external highly prestigious award efforts, as well as data-driven faculty reporting. And lastly, I'm the liaison with our post-retirement community. Today, I'm going to walk through kind of our implementation of university-wide provost-level internal awards using InfoReady and how we're expanding InfoReady to other units across campus. Um, I'm hoping that the session will be practical. I'll share not just the how, but also the why, and oh my word, what would we do differently scenarios that we have changed and adapted over time. And I hope that you'll come away with at least one tip or trick that you can implement into your use of InfoReady that will be helpful. So as Carlos kind of mentioned, please feel free to ask questions as we go. Carlos will be monitoring the chat and Q&A. And then Carlos, feel free to stop me just throughout. We'll also have Q&A at the end. So if we can go to the next slide, Rhonda. To set the stage, let me tell you just a little bit about Rice. We're located in Houston, Texas, right in the heart of the Museum District. Rice is a private research university and a part of the Association of American Universities, the AAU. We're relatively small in size. Our campus is about 300 acres, gorgeous live oaks across, but we're really big in research activity with close to 9,000 students total. They're split about 4,700 undergrads, about 4,100 graduate students. And for the purposes of this particular presentation, we have about 600 tenure and tenure track faculty represented across all disciplines from engineering and natural sciences, STEM over to humanities, social sciences, architecture, and music. I mention this so that as you think about the presentation today, you can keep in mind Rice's size in relationship to the strategies that we use, and then you can make those adjustments to best fit your scenario. Next slide, please. In 2022, Reggie DeRoche became president of Rice, and that has really started a chain reaction of growth and positive energy, which has resulted in the launch of our 10-year strategic plan, Momentous. Reggie is also an engineer, and that background has really inspired my office to adopt two terms, efficiency and scalability. Next slide, please. And the growth and ambition rate is just simply not able to be accomplished without focusing our efforts and processes in an efficient and scalable way, which is why InfoReady is so relevant and beneficial to my work, especially right now. And why we care, frankly, to have InfoReady as a tool in our toolbox. We wanted to make sure that faculty opportunities, internal awards, external nominations were able to be tracked and administered in an efficient way. We also needed a coordinated approach that could grow with us, support faculty visibility, and especially reduce administrative friction. Previously, awards were all over the place, mostly solicited through file sharing via a variety of systems, email, box, and this caused an epic headache to produce any meaningful data. In my word, trying to track down applicants from XYZ award from 5 years ago, complete nightmare, not to mention attempting to find their actual materials from that time. And that's not even considering if there was a staff turnover in the mix. It worked, but just barely. And the administrative burden was massive. So that's where InfoReady fit beautifully. It became our platform, both due to the structure that's available within it, but especially the flexibility that it provides to accommodate multiple units and needs across campus. So once we implemented InfoReady, we gained visibility across these competitions and reduced a lot of the duplication effort that was going on. And we could finally collect data on who was applying, who was being nominated, who was being recognized, and that's something that's been transformative for reporting and tracking. I'm asked for information on reporting for every board of trustees meeting that happens each year, and InfoReady has made it actually attainable to actually produce those reports. Next slide, please. A quick overview. Within my office, we manage two broad types of opportunities, both internal and external awards, and we're the central office for all things InfoReady. On the external side, things are quite complex. We manage over 200 awards annually across schools and disciplines. Some of these awards are limited submissions, while others are open call. When an award is a limited submission, managing the review process through InfoReady is a dream compared to other systems, especially if it's a multi-step review process. I would like to highlight really quickly that this is done with only 2 people, including myself and my colleague Patty Hawley. And for each of our roles, awards are only a portion of our scope. So it's really only doable because we have InfoReady in place, and it lessens the administrative burden substantially. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to focus on this middle and right section, internal awards and implementation. On the internal side, we oversee several provost level university-wide awards. There are about 5 or 6 of these each year, and these include a variety of review and application processes, which I'll give a few examples of these in just a moment. And these awards also run on a few different timelines, but they're also fairly stable in nature. So those are a few little tidbits about what makes these awards unique. We also, because of those unique factors, we needed a system that could handle the variation, but also the similarities across these awards without causing confusion. InfoReady is being adopted across the university on a unit by unit basis as the need and solution is acknowledged. We are responsible for onboarding those units, being the point of contact with our InfoReady rep. The global admin seats sit within our office, which also means that we're responsible for all system level settings and users and distributing communications for the new adoptions within the system, such as the rollout of Form Designer, which, by the way, Carlos, you guys did a brilliant job with. It's a major upgrade, and frankly, it is the only template that we use in our office and the only template that we train new units to use. So we've pretty much migrated 100% over to Form Designer, and I highly recommend, if you're not already doing that, going ahead and making that move. It will make your life much easier. So next slide. In the early days, our biggest challenge in starting a new system when we adopted InfoReady was the setup and making sure that the foundation was solid and repeatable, which aids in both efficiency and scalability. We learned very quickly that it works best to think of an application through from post-award reporting as well as from the initial onset from the applicant's perspective, and then work that process also in the reverse. We have sort of developed a set list of questions that we ask ourselves when we're approaching creating a new internal award, such as should 2 awards share one competition or should they stay completely separate? That allows us to determine multiple things, such as when do we utilize logic to determine separate applicant pathways when there are multiple application categories, or when to separate this award out into 2 separate competitions completely. We like to map out the requirements section, keeping the grid view in mind, along with the data download view. Also thinking through standardization, such as keeping question headings set to a standard, such as if we want to know faculty rank, we will use a question titled, quote, rank, with a drop-down menu with the instructions having further detail, instead of labeling the question as, quote, please input your rank in the short answer box below, quote. The latter really leads to a jumble of answers and data across multiple competition downloads, which are virtually impossible to merge, as well as cluttering up the grid view to virtual unusability. So to this end, where it makes sense, we try to keep awards similar or identical, and more on that in just a moment. Another huge takeaway from our early days is to always start with the end in mind, working backwards from your decision date, adding in sufficient buffers. When was the last time all of your reviewers returned all of their reviews on time? It never happens in our world. So how much time do reviewers need? Should nominations close? When do you need to get reports for the leadership? Will the nomination move from one award opportunity to another if they're not selected as a finalist for the initial nomination? All of these aspects take time and care when scheduling, and this reverse engineering approach has saved us a lot of headaches along the way. So the next slide, we'll talk about our Duncan Award. Carlos.
We do have a question here.
Love it.
When you onboard InfoReady to other units, do you charge those new units a fee for the license, or is this cost absorbed by your department?
That is a great question. And we actually go ahead and do charge for administrative seats across the university. So all units are paying into the central fee. Now we do run one contract through procurement, and then we do internal cost transfers.
Great, thank you. And then in regards to training, um, this is a great model you've described here. Uh, how do you train people on how to think?
Very good question. So we actually start, and we'll get a little bit more into this when we get into the implementation portion of the presentation today, but our starting point is going to our InfoReady rep and having a meeting with our InfoReady rep and the new unit to discuss the best use case and whether their use case really does fit into the InfoReady scope. That list of use cases, I have yet to find one that doesn't fit into the InfoReady scope, frankly. So that's been a really useful thing to kind of learn from our InfoReady rep how other institutions use the system best. And with that, you point a lot of times to the InfoReady resources in the actual training modules. We have them do that first. And then we actually have a meeting with them once they take a first stab at building out their form. But along the way, we do provide things like, hey, this is our best tips and tricks for setting up logic. Here is how we would recommend. Here's a shared template of something that we have used prior. We're happy to share this template with you and make sure that get you started off on the right foot. But also the form designer is so user friendly. We don't have a lot of questions in terms of building out the form. Where we get questions is in the review process and in the reporting process. And that's where we usually go and just kind of white glove it with each unit and say, hey, this is where you're at. This is where you want to get. These are the steps that can get you there. Let's think about it in reverse. So really building it from start to finish and then building it in reverse again has really helped with that. And then testing, constant testing.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So just a couple of examples. This is the Duncan Award, and it's one of our most illustrative examples. This is a prime example where having identical requirements across internal awards has really paid off in dividends. It also is one of those easy things to train, right? Because it's a duplicated effort. Um, so this award is unique though in terms of process. It does begin with dean nominations. Each dean reviews and ranks nominees from within their school and submits only one nominee per school. Those results are then shared at Dean's Council where the finalist is chosen and then the provost gives final approval. So that's kind of the brief overview of how the Duncan Award works. But here's where InfoReady shines. All of it happens in one system. There's no lost emails. There's no version confusion. You're not having people go to an old box link, an old file. They missed that it was 2025 instead of 2022, etc. And here's the other part that has been brilliant with InfoReady. Anyone who is not selected as a finalist for the Duncan is automatically moves over into consideration for our early career provost award. And we just use InfoReady's proxy submission feature. So when we first started out, we kept the original format of the Duncan, which was a single letter from the dean, and the early career award used the requirement sections to have different questions throughout. So when we moved those nomination packages over to the early career award, the materials did not match. And the review committee pretty firmly dismissed these additions. So they were like, this isn't whoever the nominator was, they did not submit the correct materials. We're not even really going to consider that. Now that the requirements match, there's no real way for the committee to distinguish between nomination packages, so each one is reviewed equitably. And again, this is a super easy process. A quick highlight here is that both the early career awardee and the Duncan awardee are publicly announced on the same day. So having the timing set where the applications that are not finalists for the Duncan can be moved over by proxy within the time frame for the committee review is pivotal. So again, that reverse engineering, looking at your timeline and keeping the end in mind is really key. Many of our deans have also commented on how much easier it is to see all of their reviews, both the ones that are currently due from this year, but also to look at last year's reviews and those that they've previously done in one place within their own login of InfoReady has been incredibly beneficial. And they've also commented that the review process is seamless and super easy and quick for them. So they really have liked the approach within the system. And keeping deans happy is always a great thing to do. So on the next slide, I'm going to delve a little bit further into the early career award example. And this is the exact same for our early career, our mid-career, and our senior career awards. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. The early career nominations are open to all campus, and it is reviewed by our Provost Awards Review Committee, and they handle all of the review and ranking process. We use InfoReady's reporting tools heavily for this, and we use them especially to pull out the metrics for the committee meeting for things like overall scores, Z-scores, raw scores. Those are kind of the three categories that we have found to be the most valuable. And thankfully, InfoReady does this for us. That saves us so much time, especially when you consider we often, for this particular award, have about 20 to 30 nominations being reviewed by 7 individuals for a total of over 140 scores to then be analyzed and thrown into a spreadsheet. InfoReady, it's just a download. It's so nice. And once finalists are then approved by the provost, InfoReady also helps us automatically notify the nominees and update the records within the system. So then we can also pull that information easily over time. So this next award, yes, Carlos.
We have a question. What kind of uh, eligibility questions are you asking in your forms?
So we don't ask a ton of eligibility questions in the form itself because typically our nominators are not going to know the answers to some of those questions. We do include the eligibility within the description section of the award. So one of the things that InfoReady does brilliantly is if we have a nominee or a nominator submit somebody who doesn't quite fit the eligibility for early career award, I think we have it set at within 10 years of your post-terminal degree and within 5 years of your first placement in a tenure track position. I think that's don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure that's the eligibility requirement for early career. Last year, we had a nominator miss that by a year for their nominee. And so all we did was go in, we sent the nominator a note and said, hey, they're actually eligible for a mid-career award. And so we're going to go ahead and bump it over. You'll get a note that we submitted it by proxy on your behalf. We just did it on the back end, moved it over, and their actual nominee ended up winning that year. So that was kind of neat to see that actual process work out really well. And that's just kind of how we handle that eligibility for this particular thing. Now, if we're talking external awards, there's a whole other process at play there. There's a committee review before we even select faculty to actually go for the award. And move forward with that. And so at that point, we put it in the hands of the actual nominee to make sure that they are eligible. And sometimes we do go in and check with our HR files and things like that, but we don't usually include eligibility questions in the actual questionnaire. You could, there are demographic questions and things like that. It would be a super easy thing to include. And if they are included, especially for an external award, we include any questions that are on that external form within our build out as well.
Okay. Thanks for that detailed answer. That was very helpful, Devon. And I'll just add that I've seen several groups use eligibility questions in forms, and they use it in conjunction with conditional logic, where they depending on the answer, they'll either display more questions or allow the applicant to move on to the next page, or they'll display a content block informing them why they are not eligible.
Yeah, we've actually used that too, and it's very successful. We've used that for our bridge funding application, which is a whole totally off topic application, but just to verify what Carlos is saying does work really well. It does.
And I'm glad to hear it works really well for you. We have another question about nominations here. This person says, with our internal award nominations, sometimes we struggle with the nominator showing up as the applicant instead of the nominee. So how do you set up your form fields and questions to make things clear when it's nominee versus nominator and managing all of that?
That is such a good question. And you have to pay attention to what fields are automatically coded to the notifications, right? I believe there are 3 fields that are coded to the notifications. It's the first name, last name, and application title. We like to say nominee first name, nominee last name, and for application title, we actually like to make that the nominator. Because that way, when we do a data download, it separates them out like that. Or if we download all of the applications as a PDF, in that table of contents, it actually shows up as nominee and nominator. Same for the grid view. Those very first 2 sections show you the nominator and the nominee. And we decided that based off of feedback from our committee. Originally, we did not have it set up that way, and the committee got quite confused as far as who they were reviewing at which time. And so that's where we've seen the most success.
So proper labeling goes a long way.
Huge. But just make sure that you do check your notifications. And especially if it's a blind nomination or something like that, you need to go in and change your notifications set up to kind of make sure that the applicant title, in the braces is not pulling that information that you may not want to be shared.
Great. Thank you, Devon, for providing that information. We got one more question related to this topic, and then I'll let you advance to the next page. This is related to the data dump you just mentioned. So the data dump you're referring to is for the nominator. Would that show up on the report as title?
Yes, I believe so. I'm pretty sure. I'm like 99% sure that yes, that's it, the answer to your question.
And when we say title, that's the title field in the system.
Yes.
Just to be clear for everyone on the webinar. Okay, thanks so much, Devon. I'll hold questions. Let's move on.
Okay. Just really quick, sorry to go back to that. One of the reasons we really like to have those things listed there is the linking over to how it looks in the table of contents, but also those are the ones that you can't change requirements on. So they are required by the system. So we will always want to know who the nominator is, and we will always want to know who the nominee is. If we do or don't get an email address, if we forget to hit that field as required, that's okay. We're going to need the nominator and the nominee. So that's just another reason to go this route.
Absolutely.
So if we move forward a slide, we're going to talk about our Outstanding Doctoral Advisor Award. And this one is very special because it involves a unique review step, which is an approval style review by our Dean of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, which happens prior to our PARC review, which is our full committee review. Here I want to highlight the flexibility that InfoReady allows within the review setup. Originally, we had this language set to approve, do not approve, which is kind of the standard template available if you do go the route of the approval form template. It is an easy one to use. And that, for us, really put our dean kind of in a box. And he asked that we change it to something a bit more appropriate. And we landed on, if you look at the screenshot here, move forward or let's talk. We did flesh out in the instructions to let him know that if he selects Let's Talk, he's not pulling a nominee package, and he's not saying that that nominee is not a great nominee. But rather, he's going to get a call from our Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, my boss, and they can actually chat through why someone may not be best suited to move forward with this award. Something that we may not know, maybe his matriculation rate isn't that great or something like that. His graduate student, one really beloved, etc. But he's got a couple lingering grad students that he's not really helping push to the finish line. Or he also, on the other side of things, might have something to highlight that one nominee is doing particularly well that hasn't yet been passed, that might come up in the committee conversation down the road. So we really wanted to make sure that this forum did not say, move forward, don't move forward, or something of that nature that was very a positive and negative situation, but really it gave our Dean of Graduates and Postdoctoral Studies the ability to reach out and have a conversation to say, hey, let me add kind of a perspective to this particular package that you might want to know. And then once this is complete, these move over into Park. All of this is captured confidentially behind the login, the SSO login. And then additionally, if we do need to utilize the viewer role within InfoReady so that perhaps the provost office can view things as needed in real time, et cetera, we can. But again, this all comes down to setting up your timing and really working backwards to make sure that the timing works. Because this is also reviewed at the same and announced at the same event that both the Duncan and Early Career Award are also announced at. But it does need to have different timing in terms of the review process with this added step. So I'm going to get into something completely different in this next slide. This is kind of a nitty gritty item, but it's something I wish I had understood better earlier on. And it's one of the most common questions that we ask ourselves when we're setting up, especially for the year, is when do I use a copy of an award versus when do I use a template for an award? When I was kind of first being trained in InfoReady and very much a newbie, this was pre-form designer template, years ago at this point. It was all use templates, use templates, use templates. They're the best option for every situation. And I would just encourage you to kind of challenge that view and think through how it would work best for you. The big highlight difference is if you're running the exact same award every single year, and that award has the same structure, the same reviewer processes, but has a few unique aspects to it that makes it different from other awards, go with a copy. It's quick, it preserves all of your setup choices. But if you're managing multiple identical awards, use a template. That ensures consistency and it lets you make updates that once you update, it cascades across all of these instances. So I kind of think of master templates as templates kind of your master key. One small change can save you hours of work later. So when I think about the examples I presented earlier, the Duncan Award and the Doctoral Advisor Award always will need the dates and the cycle updated. The description usually needs a small adjustment here and there each year. And we do like to include a list of the past winners in the supporting documents. But these two awards, especially the Doctoral Advisor Award, has specific questions within the requirement section which only pertain to this award and will only pertain to this award, making it very unique and making it a better use case for a copy. The Duncan, while the requirement section, like I mentioned, is the exact same as these three over here, the early career, mid-career, and senior career award that you see over here in the template box, it has a very unique review structure, which is why we like to use a copy of this one rather than the template function in combination with these other awards. So looking at the early career, mid-career, and senior career awards, we're using that one template because all of those are the exact same minus the title and a few little descriptor things. So it allows me to go into one template, update the dates, cycle, if I'm using automatic reviewer list, which I highly recommend, it saves a lot of time. Then I can just go in one time and adjust these minute changes across all of these awards versus having to go in 3 individual times. And then I just go into each one to update things like the description, the supporting documents individually. It also ensures that if I make a change to the requirements, which is very rare in the case of provost awards for us, but if I do need to make a change there, it stays standardized. And I only have to make sure to go back to the Duncan to make sure that that standardization is kept the same. And this consistently cuts down on errors and time. Carlos, are there any other questions on awards before I kind of move into our implementation on how we set up awards, process awards, any of that stuff?
I have a couple comments on copying and templates in relation to data and reporting. Devon has provided a great tip here and examples on how to best use the functionality and the benefits of them. If you find that in the way you've currently used InfoReady, where fields that have different labels are creating huge reports in the reports tab when really you would love to be able to compare from cycle to cycle, year to year. I've got good news for you. If you edit, go into those launch competitions and edit the field label uh, to make it the same as another one that is labeled more appropriately, it will automatically pull it in together. So the system will adjust in real time to collapse that reporting a little bit on those fields.
That is very exciting. I did not realize that. So I'm gonna get off of here and go play a little bit in that particular aspect.
Yeah, so if you have any older competitions where you want to clean it up and improve the reporting, you can definitely do that.
Brilliant. And does it also clue you in if you're going to lose any data?
It would, but it absolutely would. Luckily, you would not lose data in that situation if you're editing
Perfect.
the field label.
Perfect. I've got in my little tips and tricks slide, I've got kind of an example of where that comes in clutch. So that's awesome.
Yeah, no, you won't be able to edit the options in a multiple choice question, but the field label is a different story.
Perfect.
We're
So
learning together.
I
Yeah.
love it. Any other questions or thoughts kind of on awards before I move into implementation across campus?
No, I think you can move on to
Okay.
the next topic.
So yes, so we're going to talk about rolling versus an enrollment period. When thinking about this makes me giggle. When thinking about the implementation of InfoReady across your campus, we started out using rolling where anybody could add administrator seats and implement InfoReady into their unit at any time throughout the year. And that kind of style of approach. And frankly, it killed us. It was an incredible drain both on our office and our procurement office, doing multiple rounds on essentially the same effort. And doing the rolling unit additions also made it where we were constantly training new groups on the same topics, the same questions, and it took just a lot of focus and time. So we again questioned ourselves on how do we scale the use of InfoReady in an efficient way, and we landed on an HR style enrollment period. Now, I will forewarn you that we're implementing that this year. So this is where we're going. We've not actually tested this yet. But so far, we're hoping that it's going to be successful. And we definitely need to do something differently. And so what we're doing is we are doing it from May through June. We chose those timeframes because it links to our contract renewal date. So procurement can do all of it in one shebang. And then it also links to our budget cycle. So that way the units know what to expect and we can run it through one time rather than over and over. So it also gives units the summertime to get up to speed and figure out their processes prior to the start of the academic year. It's also, I would not say that we're slow in VPAA by any stretch of the imagination, but it is our slowest season. Again, not slow, but slowest season. So it does allow us to be a bit more available to kind of help with any of those questions and link any of those things. Also, InfoReady support portal, fantastic, super responsive, just really clear answers and things like that. Just big shout out. I've not experienced a better support process with any other tool implementation that we've done. We really do try to get as much set up during the semi downtime as possible, which I will also add InfoReady is a great help to us because we can set up a competition with a launch on a future date, and thus we can work super in advance. And that really does help us with that. So this is where we have landed in terms of what we're going to implement this year because doing this rolling really has just been a big old struggle. So we're also going to do a marketing push. Our provost is going to put a notice in the newsletter in about February, March, April, sometime in there to make sure that everybody, all of the units are aware that this tool is again available because that has been one of our things. We kind of did a soft rollout with InfoReady. And so now we're getting more and more kind of the snowball effect of units hearing about it, seeing its implementation, people saying, oh my goodness, you have such a better way to do this, more efficient way. We're drowning here. What do you use? And most often the answer is InfoReady. Again, that use case slide is clutch. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'm going to move into best tips and tricks.
No questions on this right now, but I'm sure people are thinking about it and are going to come around with questions. This is one people always ask us, but they
Mhm.
need to ruminate on it a little bit.
Sure. Okay, let's go ahead and move into best tips and tricks because I think that might have some questions too. So when we first started today, I told you that I hoped you could grab at least one takeaway, a tip or trick that could kind of help you in your use of InfoReady across campus. And here's a few, just a quick list of a few things I've covered, plus a couple of extras thrown in here for a bit of spice and excitement. So this first one, this was a big old pitfall that I fell into this year. I would highly recommend you avoid having two separate units manage and set up the review process. In particular, that setup portion. And this comes from us having opened the review feature for an external limited submission award to one of our schools wanting to do an internal review process and then the selection process for that within their school prior to a campus-wide review. We took a very hands-off approach, which is completely fine and frankly preferable, but the issue came when it was time to actually do that campus-wide review. And we just didn't notice that a few of the school's review settings, such as what steps ran concurrently, the blinding, things like that, were a bit different than we expected. And we just didn't note it. And so it gave us a bit of trouble until we were able to go back in and really look at how they set things up and figured that process out. So if you want two units to manage a review process, I highly recommend you pick one unit to either completely build out the setup or both units collaborate on the setup across the board to make sure that you know exactly what the settings are set to. There's such flexibility in the review process that it really can kind of go brilliantly, or it can go a little squirrely if you just aren't aware of what and how things are being set up.
Okay,
So,
can I
yes.
share an anecdote that I heard recently
Yeah.
related to that? I was speaking to a medical school that has been using InfoReady for like 10 years, and they had two new administrators. They caught on quickly. They their exercise for training, well, they provided a document and said, well, build this in InfoReady, including the routing steps. They built it completely differently, and the super admin I was talking to said they were both excellent competitions that they built. So built completely different, both very high quality competitions. So the flexibility is there to do quite a few different things. And I say that because those were people that built them well. They understood quickly. It can also go awry. So these tips and tricks that you're going through, very helpful.
And this is just, you clued my brain onto something in that one of the things when I joined Bryce, my position was brand new. So there was no training manual or this is how somebody has previously done it in your position type of thing. And so I implemented everybody, within our office wrote out our standard operating procedures. So that way I ended up going on maternity leave. Well, I could just hand over my standard operating procedures and whoever was taking over that portion of my role was able to do that and see how I did it. I would highly recommend figuring out what your standard operating procedures are for your unit, because that way you can standardize things like question headings, routing step, implementation, things like that. Because yes, it's flexible, which is both a blessing and a little bit squirrely at times.
Yeah, the templates and copying help a lot in that regard.
Yes, for sure. Um, So also kind of similar to that, I do recommend literally drawing out your review process before you try to build it. I'm a big fan of a whiteboard or just pen and paper, taking it completely a bit Luddite and just building it out. and figuring out what your workflow is, we do have one internal competition process that houses 6 different review steps, and each review step is wildly different from each other. So a quick highlight that I, again, I don't bother with any other template in the routing steps besides the form designer either. I just am very pro form designer. I think it's much more user friendly, and it also adapts if you need changes down the road much more easily than any other aspect. If all of a sudden you need to add a question, you don't have to change templates. You can just build it, add a question within the form designer. Um, it's just a ton more flexible, and you can also train units on one template instead of trying to explain comments and ratings versus the approval templates, etc. You can do all of it in Form Designer. So if you haven't delved into that, highly recommend. You can also always use that preview function if you're using the Form Designer. That is a brilliant addition. It's your best defense against errors, which is a key benefit to the Form Designer template, both in just all the way throughout, and especially in the progress report section too. So another thing to do is keep the grid view in mind as you're building your questions. We quickly realized that based on how you frame your questions, your grid view is either incredibly helpful and powerful or completely useless. And because it can only kind of show you a set number of words. And again, when you put your entire question as kind of the title for that question, it really gets very muddy versus doing a key aspect where you're looking through the data. If you've ever used data or R, you know what a data set looks like, and keeping those headers short really helps. You can also edit throughout, so don't be scared. Again, this past spring, I was tasked with designing and building out an incredibly complicated form that really was kind of told to me as a one sentence thing. And then, so it was very infant in both the idea and scope. And I was given about 3 days to do it. And this is also the application that has the 6 levels of review. So it's an open application that's going to run for multiple years. And I still had to launch it, even though I didn't really have time to test it. And I didn't really have time to build it out as much as I would normally prefer. So we've made substantial edits along the way, including edits to the requirements, the routing steps, the notifications, the progress reports. I mean, you name it, we have edited it since launch. And InfoReady is super clever. This is what I was mentioning earlier, Carlos. InfoReady is so clever at letting you know if a change you're making is going to cause you to lose data. And an example of that is changing a question from a short answer to a drop-down style. And this would delete the prior gathered short answer information as the question in the original format doesn't fit the new format. So what I choose to do instead is keep both and add that drop-down menu. So that way I'm able to then parse the data and merge the data down the road, but keep that original short answer and make the short answer optional within the form and have the drop-down menu be required. So that really has helped keep the data. I'm very pro on not deleting data. And if I download the spreadsheet and looking for things and things like that, I can also just hand code the 10 applications that we got a short answer and move those over into that drop down menu, still making that usable where I don't lose that data along the way. But InfoReady lets you know if you're going to mess something up or if you're going to lose something. That I think is a key feature. Definitely use it. It makes you just don't be worried about making an edit or having to launch something maybe before you really feel great about it, because you can go in and edit along the way. Keeping similar, I love to do that. That way you have the flexibility to move the applications if needed. Another kind of example we kind of talked about earlier about nominator, putting in somebody for an early career award. They weren't actually eligible. We can just move it over, easy peasy, no big deal. And so that really has been helpful, or moving applications over from award to award, or merging the data and being able to look at things across fields, that kind of thing, really helpful. Template versus copy. Hopefully what my examples helped out with figuring out what that works for you, how it works for you. Just make a choice based off of what costs you the least amount of time. and effort, and especially what will limit your errors over time, because there's so many details that you're able to do in InfoReady. I always assign myself as a reviewer to experience the workflow from the inside. It's also a super easy way to go in and record your screen to provide exact examples for your own training materials. If you just go in and you need to serve as an applicant for something, or if you go in and assign yourself as a reviewer. That's how we got our deans on board in order to change from, an email process over into an InfoReady process. I just did a quick little, 40-second video, I think it ended up being, and they saw how easy it was, and they got on board very quickly because of that. And they weren't having to see things like the kind of testing materials and things like that. They saw the actual form. Another thing is, I personally highly recommend investing in the directory lookup feature. If you're anything like Rice and have email aliases are a total thing at your university, then if you don't get it, then you'll likely have duplicate accounts pop up when assigning reviewers. One workaround for that is to have any new user log into InfoReady first using their, in our case, SSO, and then you can actually search for them in the user database to ensure you're using the correct email address. My last name Jones, d.jones@rice.edu. Whew, man, there's a lot of Joneses, okay? It's like Smiths. There's just a lot of us out there. So you can assign the wrong person, but then you can also assign multiple accounts to a person if you do put the wrong email in, not using the directory lookup feature. So that's kind of my trip to work around it. When you were talking about training that we provide our new units, that's one of the things that we have done in the past prior to directory lookup. So one thing I left off of here by mistake is to please utilize your InfoReady rep. Especially whenever a new unit voices interest in adopting InfoReady, our rep, Katie, is super well versed in different use cases and how a variety of institutions is using the system, and that I'm not going to be aware of, I won't have seen. So she can really speak to the best added options and kind of how the system would best suit their needs. I usually CC Katie on everything that I do with InfoReady at this point, because she really kind of keeps a pulse on what we're doing and why we're doing it. And she can kind of fill in the gaps that I may have left off of something in a support ticket or something like that. But our InfoReady rep, Katie, is our first step when we're onboarding a new unit, and really any new implementation across the board and any new questions. And finally, attend webinars like this one. Many of these things that I've shared, I've learned from one or multiple of you. And it's a great place to kind of find out what new implementations are coming down the pipeline too. So I highly recommend all of the training webinars, and especially these peer spotlight. I've just learned so much in terms of how different institutions have creatively put InfoReady to use. Talking about uses, let's go ahead and move to this next slide here. Here are some additional use cases that we currently use at Rice. I'm sure there are more. These are just ones that I'm aware of. So it kind of started out as just purely an award management tool, and it's basically become an institutional workhorse, and it's just continuing to grow. And so here you can kind of see student scholarship applications, HR and administrative forms, bridge funding requests, grant applications, progress reports, surveys, and my favorite, I've done a lunch order through InfoReady. So the flexibility along with the structure really does make the platform super valuable, and we're really grateful to have it in our employ. So just in closing, just little last slide here. It's much more than a technical project. It really has helped us with the alignment, efficiency, and scalability. And we pretty much created a system that supports our mission to recognize excellence and, kind of simplify our processes and ensure equitable access to these opportunities. So any questions? Thank you again for joining me today. Any questions about anything, whether it's related to this or just InfoReady in general at Rice?
Thanks so much, Devon. Great presentation. We do have a couple questions. Before we get into a couple questions, I have some helpful, maybe good news for you. You mentioned directory lookup has been great for you. We recently created a nominations tool that is paired with directory lookup. And so anyone who has directory lookup, we can enable that for you. Same thing with the Dynamic Profiles Plus feature. And so that really enhances the nomination process for anyone using
You
it.
have given me yet another thing to get off of this call and go play with.
Right.
I love
So that tool, we have to enable it for you. Devin, you spoke about Katie. Absolutely contact your account manager if you've got directory lookup or Dynamic Profiles Plus. Now that I mentioned that, so I like giving good news. Everyone likes giving good news. I wanted to give some good news. A couple questions for you. One of those, in the routing steps review process, have you used the form designer routing step for under?
Yes, that is all I use at this point. I do not even bother with the other ones. Frankly, it's just so much more flexible, especially going back in and editing the form designer routing step. That is my absolute favorite. I don't train anybody on anything else.
Right. So in addition to the general form designer as a template, you're focused solely on using the form designer routing step as well.
100%.
Lots more flexibility with that. What we often get questions from people who use comments and ratings, and they say they ask questions such as, couldn't I have 5 rating scales in one comment box? It would be great to do that instead of having a comment box for each
Huh?
rating scale. So the form designer routing step definitely addresses that. And just more flexibility in building a more varied and purpose-oriented review form.
Very, very much so. All of the above.
We've got another one for you. Uh, with the faculty award decisions in the system, how do you go about moving that data to other tools or databases within the institution, or do you at all?
So we primarily track things via Asana. And that's been a new implementation by the university this year. And so we're pretty much doing that manually at this point. I don't think there's an integration with Asana yet. Hint, hint. I hope maybe it could come down the pipeline.
But well, InfoReady has an API now. So if Asana is able to take in uh, data from an API, then you should be able to.
Okay, you've got another thing to add to my list to play with.
Okay. Um, Here is one last question. And I actually might ask for clarity on this. How do you send requests for progress report submission?
Oh, that's super easy, actually. I love the progress reports. You can, with the one that I told you about that has 6 different review steps, wild. That one also has, depending on the application that we receive, it has a variety of different progress reports needed. So some are every 90 days, some are at the end of the project only, some are at the end of a year, and then the next year, and the next year, just depending on what is awarded. So in the progress report section, you can actually create almost like your own routing steps, but you can create multiple of these. So we've created a progress report for each of these, and then you can just individually assign them to the application. If you have tons and tons and tons of applications, I mean, I'm not in the student world, so I don't have hundreds of applications for each one running at the same time. But as soon as, so I would imagine you want kind of to pick one or maybe two to kind of automatically assign as a batch, because I do believe that you can assign progress reports as batches. Ours are more kind of white glove for this particular case. But as soon as it's awarded, we go ahead and assign it, and then you can actually select your date range for it. And that's how we do our progress report ones. And we just went in and tailored our notification for each one.
Thanks so much, Devin. Yeah, progress reports are really helpful to close the loop and get additional information after the fact. Okay, so that's it for Q&A. Thanks so much for the presentation, Devin. I've got a couple slides to get through, and then we'll close. We have a few upcoming webinars on December 9th, which is my birthday, so I have a webinar duty on my birthday. We have What's New, where we'll go over all of the features and functionality that were released in the fourth quarter of the calendar year. And then on December 11th, we have a peer spotlight webinar with Tufts University. This is more of a research development focused webinar. And then a couple more things. If you have any questions, there's several ways to contact us. If you're interested in using InfoReady, please contact my colleague Max Dinerman, who's Director of Sales. For existing InfoReady administrators, if you have questions about your license or any product functionality that was discussed today, feel free to contact me, or you can even reach out to the support team if you have more technical questions. Someone